Hello, everybody. I'm your host, John Suchan, and this is the Fanatical Elfz Network. We are here today because we are honoring Jim Brown. We have just been learned today, as across the country, that the great legend, former Cleveland Brown running back Jim Brown has died, and he was 87 years old. And we wanted to come on air and share our thoughts about his legend. And so I've got our guest tonight is Steve Gill down from Nashville. And thank you, Steve, for joining the program tonight.
Sure thing. Sad day. Sad day for Browns fans, especially Browns fans my age. I'm 65.
Yes.
And like I've said before, my dad always had tickets to baseball and football games. And so when the weather was nice, he would take my brother and I to see the Browns. And I actually got to see Jim Brown play live as a kid. I don't remember much of it. I remember some of it, but
Right.
Like I said, I'm 65. But
he was drafted in 1957 by the Browns.
Weird thing. Paul Brown wanted to draft a quarterback, a successor to Otto Graham.
Yes.
And he wanted Len Dawson, who the Steelers took. So Paul Brown settled on Jim Brown.
And he was picked number 6. He wasn't the number
one
draft
pick. Yeah.
Yeah. And he played 9 straight seasons for the Browns, which is just, no other team. He came from Syracuse.
Known more for his lacrosse playing than his football playing. He was an All-American in college lacrosse, never an All-American in college football, which is amazing.
You said you went to some games. Do you remember like any specific plays or when you watched him?
No, I just remember I was amazed by this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he would run over people. He'd bounce off of people. You'd think he'd be tackled, and all of a sudden, boom, there he's going down the field, and he was huge. I mean, I was a kid, so everybody was big, but this guy just was enormous. He was amazing. I mean, you think about it. His last year in the NFL was 1965. He finished with like 1,544 yards rushing.
Yes. I'm looking at a stat line right now. Yeah.
And you know who finished second? Gale Sayers. He was 677 yards behind Jim Brown. I mean, that's amazing. How great he was. I mean, everybody, Gale Sayers, one of the great running backs. Well, Jim Brown was the greatest running back and probably the greatest football player. I mean, he was astonishing.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the yards he had, over 12,000 yards. And when he first started playing, there were only 12 games in a season.
Right.
And defenses were stacked to stop Jim Brown.
It is really amazing. I mean, you look at that stat line, anybody pulls up on Google. I mean, it's just, I've looked at his stat lines many times because we've talked a lot on this show about current running back Nick Chubb and how he has climbed the ladder board. And he will, if Nick stays with the Browns and at least over the next year or two, should pass Leroy Kelly, who's number 2 on the Browns list at 7,000 some yards. So the idea of capturing, I mean, it's phenomenal to think that Jim Brown is sitting at 12,312 yards.
I know.
And in the few seasons he played, it's just amazing. Amazing. And then he, shifted gears and told Art Modell to stuff it. And
he was over in England filming The Dirty Dozen. And Art Modell told him, well, you need to get back because training camp is starting. And he said, well, I'm filming a movie right now. I'll be back as soon as we're done. And Modell threatened him to fine him every day he missed camp. And Jim Brown's answer was, well, I'm going to retire. Because literally, he could make more monies making movies than he could playing in the NFL at that time. Which,
and he was very successful.
Think about the contracts that are thrown around now. I mean, it's movie making was more profitable than playing football.
Absolutely.
For him.
Steve,
and
I'm
sorry.
He
made some, I mean, the Dirty Dozen. If you're a guy and you don't cry when Jim Brown dies at the end, there is something wrong with you. In the 100 Rifles with Burt Reynolds and Raquel Welch.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that what year did that movie come out? Was it 1960? Was it? He was playing football. I mean, it was at the tail end. He
was getting ready. They were filming it before training camp started.
In 66 or 65?
66. 65 was his last season.
And then the idea that he was nominated into the Hall of Fame.
Matter of fact, I think 60. When I was a kid, 65 was the last. That was when my dad took me to games. He took me to games in 64 and 65.
Okay. Hey, Steve,
I was just a little kid.
We're gonna pause just real quick for a break, and then we'll be right back.
Well,
you've got to part ways.
I've got to go. I've got my wife and I are going out to dinner.
Oh, wonderful!
But just I know everybody out there. Somebody has a piece of Jim Brown memorabilia. I've got a little card one of my Middle Tennessee Browns backers gave me. It's a Jim Brown card with a piece of the seat during that one of the games he played. In a little piece of plastic, and my wife one year gave me a little mini helmet that's got Marion Motley autogram and Jim Brown's autograph on it.
Ooh!
So
wow.
Everybody out there, just kind of dig. If you don't have it displayed, mine's displayed over here in my shrine.
Yes,
like a good Browns fan, we all have a shrine. But just take them out, take a look at them, and just remember that he was the greatest football player ever, and he played for the Cleveland Browns.
He did.
So I got to go. Thanks, John.
Thank you so much, Steve. Okay, folks, we're going to pause for a break. This is the Fanatical Elfz Network, and we're honoring Jim Brown tonight. We'll be right back after these commercials. Okay, we are back here on the Fanatical Elfz Network. And I'm your host, John Suchan. I'm part of our network here, and we are honoring Jim Brown, who earlier today passed away peacefully, according to his wife, in his sleep. He was 87 years old. And we just had our colleague, Steve Gill, from down there in Tennessee, who joined us for a few minutes. And, you just review and you consider everything about Jim Brown and what he meant to Cleveland and to the Browns organization. And, how can we honor him? And, we've talked about Jim Brown. Everybody talks about Jim Brown. I mean, he's a legend. He's everything to this organization. Right before the break, Steve talked about how, the whole thing with Art Modell, and he quit football. He played 9 seasons and went into acting and was very successful in that career. Made it to the Hall of Fame in 1971, and has been an activist, someone who's very involved in the community. He was a legend by so many. There's I saw earlier LeBron James, the Cleveland Cavalier legend, honoring the great Jim Brown at a basketball game, years ago. That sort of greatness, meeting greatness and honoring that. He will be missed. He represents what this Browns organization is all about. And I saw some people talking about maybe putting his jersey number 32 at the 50-yard line. I think that would be pretty cool. So it would be interesting to see what the Browns end up doing to honor him now. And his legend will live on. He really is just phenomenal. When you start looking through these stats of his, they're really just crazy good. He started in the league in 1957, was drafted out of Syracuse. And like Steve said, he was actually a really good lacrosse player. But I mean, his total yards every season, keeping in mind that they had only 12 games in a year, he was going for 1,500 yards, 1,500 yards, 1,300 yards, 1,400 yards, 1,800 yards. His 2 seasons that he didn't go over 1,000 yards was his rookie campaign, when he went for 942 yards and 9 touchdowns on 202 carries. In 1962, he ran only 996 yards on 230 carries. Let's not forget about the 106 touchdowns that he scored. I mean, just phenomenal. He carried a 5.2 rush per average. You know, we talk, like I mentioned before we went to the break, about Nick Chubb and what he's doing. And really, I mean, Nick Chubb is doing some phenomenal things. But for what Jim Brown did in the short span of time that he played for the Browns, 9 seasons, and then he quit. He just left football. The greatest football player of all time just got up and left. So we honor Jim Brown tonight, and we will miss him. And there will be a lot more to talk about as this weekend moves forward. We here at the Fanatical Elfz Network will be bringing you another show in the very near future, either this weekend or early next week, where we'll have not only myself, but the rest of the gang here, including Steve, Joel K., the left guard, Elliot Cannell, BP from Pepper Pike, and Rod Bloom. They will also be bringing their own takes about the greatness of Jim Brown. We appreciate you tuning in right now, and we hope you have a good Friday evening wherever you're listening from. And again, this is the Fanatical Elfz Network. I'm your host, John Suchan. Appreciate the time. We will miss you, Jim Brown. You were the greatest. For now, have a good night, everybody. Take care.